All right, guys, so we're back with chapter 27. This is female reproduction. So for female reproduction, we're going to go over the reproductive organs. We're also going to talk about the menstrual cycle and anything that can interfere with a female's ability to be able to reproduce. So there's different female reproductive organs. There's the ovaries, the fallopian tubes. So here's the ovary, there's the fallopian tube, the uterus itself, the vagina, the clitoris, and the vulva. We also have the mons pubis, which is going to be on the outside. Okay, the labium minora and majora on the sort of on the outside of the body. Okay. There's different reproductive cells. So we have the germ cells. Germ cells, again, these are stem cells. So they're going to have 46 chromosomes, and we call those oogonia. Okay, oogonium for one, oogonia for multiple ones. Okay, and then we have the sex gametes, and so those sex gametes again are going to have 23 chromosomes. Now, reproductive cells for females is a little bit different in that there's a couple of different pauses that happen. Okay, and so we can have these primary oocytes. They're going to, you can see that those are diploid. Remember, diploid means that there's two N or double, and then N is going to be haploid. Okay, so this is sort of a somatic cell or a body cell within your body is going to be diploid. We need to have half the genetic components from our mom and then half from our dad are going to form together to form our 46 chromosomes. Okay, and then these cells are going to undergo mitosis. Those oogonium cells are going to undergo mitosis, and when they do that, we can have some of them remain being oogonium, and then some of them are going to be primary oocytes. And this is when meiosis 1 is going to begin. Okay. Now, before birth, as you can see, we're going to have meiosis actually stop in prophase 1. Okay, prophase 1. That's the first step of meiosis. Okay. But after puberty, we're going to have meiosis 1 resuming, meaning that we're going to continue and we're going to complete meiosis 1. Now, what happens is we're going to continue to divide. Okay. And we're going to get what's called a secondary oocyte. Now, each time that we do this, we get one egg, and then we get 3 what are called polar bodies. And polar bodies are supportive for that egg. An egg is a giant cell. It is way bigger than your other body cells. Okay, so it does require specific support. So once we do this, okay, is that the oocyte here, it's going to arrest or pause at metaphase 2. Okay, now remember, metaphase 2 is right in the middle of our meiosis 2 cycle, right? Because we have prophase, metaphase, right? So we're not doing anaphase or telophase yet, okay? And we're not going to do that until we have sperm penetration, okay? So once sperm penetration happens, then we're going to complete our meiosis cycle. But you can see that we develop into an ovum and then 3 polar bodies. So the vulva, let's talk about that, the anatomy for a second, okay? So the vulva is kind of all of this area, okay? This is the external view and the internal view of the vulva, okay? So first we have what's called the prepuce. You remember that we had the prepuce in the males as well, okay? That was the foreskin. We have what's called the glans clitoris. We have the labia minor or minora. We have the corpus cavernosum, also found in males, right? We have what's called the vestibule. We have the urethral opening here. We have the labium minora or majora, sorry, pulled away here. And there's the vaginal opening. Okay. We also have the Bartholin's glands here. Okay. This is showing you another view. Okay. And so right here, this is the uterus. The uterus has some different muscular tissues. So we have the endometrium, which is that inside lining. Then we have the myometrium. Myo means muscle, so it's like a muscle layer. And then it's surrounded by the parametrium, which is going to be on the outside. This top area is called the fundus. And then down here, we have the isthmus. Okay. Now, this, the uterus, it has some different ligaments, okay? So right here, we're going to find the broad ligament. Okay. We also have a round ligament, which I don't think is pictured. No, it's not. And then we have, this is an ovary. Okay. The ovary is about the size of an almond, each ovary. Okay. And and that is attached back here with the ovarian ligament. This is the vagina. The vagina is essentially a tube. And then you're going to find the cervix right there before we get to that opening of the uterus. Okay. Now, this is, again, an ovary right here. And when we look at that ovary, it is going to have these finger-like projections that are wrapping around it. Those are called fimbriae. Okay. And they're right at the area of this uterine tube, also called the fallopian tube. Okay. We have the infundibulum, the ampulla, and then the isthmus. So the fallopian tubes, the distal ends are at that fimbriae, that sort of finger-like areas. Those are going to be able to collect the ovulated secondary oocyte. Those are lined with simple columnar epithelium. They have cilia within them. They also have mucus secreted within the tube. The cilia are going to help to move that ovum or even the fertilized egg to the uterus. The walls are composed of smooth muscles, and those smooth muscles can also do that milking motion or peristalsis kind of motion that we've talked about. Okay. And in the ampulla, this is where fertilization has to occur. So the sperm has to be able to travel from the vagina through the cervix into the uterus and then choose the appropriate tube to then fertilize in the ampulla. Only sperm that can swim that far have a chance, right? And also, we generally, as women, only ovulate from one side or the other. A lot of people go one, like they might ovulate from the left side and then the right side, but sometimes they only ovulate from one side, where there's a lot that happens here. And so the sperm also has to sort of choose the right side. The uterus, we've already talked about those different walls, right? We have the myometrium, that's the muscle layer. These layers of smooth muscle are used to evacuate the menses and to deliver the fetus at the end of pregnancy. They do that through oxytocin. And then the endometrium is simple columnar epithelium. During pregnancy, it gets triggered by progesterone to help it to prepare for implantation of a fertilized egg. There are also uterine glands. They help to proliferate to provide fructose for the pre-embryo while the implantation is happening. And then there are spiral arteries that are going to proliferate or make more of to accompany the proliferation or the growth of the placenta. The vagina is lined with stratified squamous epithelium. Remember, almost every tube or area that's going to come into contact with something outside of the body is going to be stratified squamous epithelium. That helps it to resist abrasion. And it also has those folds, just like we saw in the stomach, called rugae, and they allow it to expand and contract. The wall is made up of smooth muscle. Now, within the vagina, we have a microbiome. That's going to have lactobacillus bacteria. Lactobacillus bacteria help to produce lactic acid, and that gives us an acidic pH to prevent the potential pathogens from colonizing here. Ovaries are located in the pelvis again, and they're located, they're about the size of an almond. They have different ligaments. So we have that broad ligament, we have a suspensory ligament, and then we have the ovarian ligament. And they're organized within follicles. Each contains an oocyte. We have what are called primordial follicles. These primordial follicles are immature, and we have these until puberty. Then we start to see the appearance of Graafian follicles. Those Graafian follicles you should see in lab looking under the microscopes or looking at images under a microscope now. And you should see those Graafian follicles start to mature. You can see there's primary follicles right here, secondary follicle, and we're going to start to see the Graafian follicle there. So for oogenesis, this, again, I sort of already went over this, but just to go over it again, we have those oogoniums. Some are going to remain oogonium. These are going to be diploid cells. We also get that primary oocyte. It's going to go on and go through meiosis 1. This is going to begin before birth, but it is going to pause, and then it's going to be completed after puberty. Then we're going to have meiosis 2. Meiosis 2 is also going to pause, and it only completes if fertilization occurs. Okay? So that is the one that I think is most helpful. So these Graafian follicles are ovarian follicles, and they have granulosa cells. Granulosa cells in this image are green. They feed and care for the oocyte that they are going to enclose, and they respond to FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone, at puberty to mature and to grow, right? It's growing that follicle. That's what FSH is follicle stimulating hormone, helps to grow up those follicles. The thecal cells, right here, it's showed by the pink, those are going to produce androgens in response to luteinizing hormones, so our progesterone and our estrogen. This is what happens during our follicle maturation. So we start with this primordial follicle. It's going to continue to grow. Here is a primary follicle. You can start to see these granulosa cells along the outside. There's that oocyte in the center, and then we have what's called the zona pellucida. Then this is our secondary, okay? And so we continue to grow. There's that zona pellucida. We get to see the nucleus now and the oocyte, and then there's those thecal cells. Then we're going to have that tertiary follicle. These are those thecal cells right here. There is the oocyte. And what's going to happen is that this tertiary follicle is actually going to ovulate out during each monthly cycle, right? During our menstrual cycle, we have an ovulating follicle. And so what happens is that it ruptures out and it lets that oocyte out. And then we sort of leave behind this corpus luteum afterwards. So this is our ovarian cycle, our menstrual cycle, sort of showing you the phases of it, okay? So we have the menstrual phase. This is usually day 1 right here. Menses, or that menstrual phase, is the first 5 days, okay? Then we get to our proliferative phase. The proliferative phase is when our egg develops and the endometrium is going to proliferate or to grow larger, right? And we also sometimes call this our follicular phase, And this varies, but it generally goes for about 14 days, okay? Now, just so you know, the proliferative phase, the follicular phase, they sometimes call all of this follicular phase, okay? So menses happening usually within that first 5 days. And again, that's a big range. Some women, their menses last only about 3 days. Sometimes it lasts up to 10 days. So it just depends, okay? And then we have our proliferative or our follicular phase. And this is where our follicles are growing, right? So we're doing this, growing up those follicles. Then at day 14-ish, we're going to do ovulation. Ovulation only lasts about 12 to 24 hours. And then we have what's called the secretory phase. This is also called the luteal phase, because think about luteal hormone, right? Luteinizing hormone. So this is when our endometrium is going to thicken, the secretion and the blood supply is going to increase to the uterus, and the follicle is going to manufacture progesterone. Now, if pregnancy does not occur, meaning that fertilization does not occur, then we're going to get a significant estrogen and progesterone decrease. It's going to drop suddenly. When that happens, we're going to have that menstrual phase again. So about every 28 days. This is showing you what's happening at each phase. So this is the ovarian cycle. Okay? So we get that primordial follicle. It starts to grow, Graafian follicle. We're going to ovulate at about 14 days. We leave behind the corpus luteum, and then we leave behind what are called corpus albicans. You have a corpus albicans, if you're a female, for every time you've ever ovulated in your ovaries. Okay, it's a left behind sort of whitish area. Okay, this is what happens with the body temperature. I don't know if you can, you know this, but you can actually watch your body temperature. If you take your temperature every day in the morning, you can see when you are going to ovulate. Okay, it is not a huge change in temperature. You can see it's just about 1 degree change that happens. But you can see that happening. Okay. This is what's happening with our anterior pituitary hormones. So the blue line is going to be our luteinizing hormone, and then our green line is going to be our follicle stimulating hormone. So you can see that this is our menses and our follicular phase. And then look at that peak with luteinizing hormone. We also get a peak with follicle stimulating hormone. But look what happens, right? Follicle stimulating hormone is generally on the top until right around ovulation, and then they flip-flop. Now, luteinizing hormone is on top, okay? Then we get our estrogen and progesterone. We call estrogen estradiol, okay? And so here's what's happening here. We get our estrogen. It's going up, going up, going up, going up, going up, and then a sudden drop, okay? And here we have our progesterone, It's going to go up and then down. And you can also see these flip-flop, okay? And a lot of times that's where you see sort of mood swings, so to speak, is because of the issue here with the estrogen and the progesterone and how they've sort of flip-flopped. And so here we have our uterine cycle. So the menses were shedding out, okay, we're thin. During that follicular phase, we start to build up, build up, build up, build up, build up. And then we have menses, so we're going to slough it back off. Okay, so menses first 5-ish days. Follicular phase is going to last till about day 14. Luteal phase until about 28, and then we have menses again. So it just repeats itself. Okay. This is showing you that hormonal cycle of the follicular phase, and then ovulation, and then the luteal phase. Okay. So breasts are also part of the reproductive system, and they're also part of the growth and development. So the nipple is surrounded by our pigmented areola, and the mammary glands are specifically modified sweat glands. You can see them here. Right there. They produce the milk in response to prolactin. Prolactin is for pro-milk or prolactin, right, to help us to lactate. And the glands are going to lead to ducts that are going to exit at the nipple. The ducts contain smooth muscles. Those are going to contract to cause the milk to let down due to that release of oxytocin. There are some causes of female infertility as well. So similar to how we talked about sort of different categories, there's ovulation disorders. So what's causing the woman not to be able to ovulate? One of them is aging. Some of it is diminished ovarian reserves and premature ovarian failure. There's also some endocrine disorders like PCOS. There are some tubal causes, for instance, pelvic inflammatory disease, PID, or if there's been a previous ectopic pregnancy. Previous ectopic pregnancy or an ectopic pregnancy is when the fertilized egg is actually going to attach into the oviduct or the fallopian tube. It's not going to travel all the way into the uterus before it detaches in. And then there can be some either uterine or cervical causes. So there can be what's called a uterine abnormality. Sometimes there's like a tilted pelvis is what they call it, or a tilted uterus. There could be fibroids or endometriosis. There can be poor cervical mucus quantity or quality, or even infections can cause this. So any blockages can cause that through infection. So this is showing you those hormonal changes that happen for both females and males. So this side is going to be females, this side is going to be males. Okay? So remember that we have that gonadal releasing hormone. So at about the age of 8, the hypothalamus is going to increase its production of the gonadotropin releasing hormone, or GnRH. Okay? That's going to trigger the anterior pituitary to release luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Then the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone are going to trigger that testosterone production over here in the testes and the estrogen production over in the ovaries. Then we're going to have some effects of those sex hormone release, right? So we're going to get spermatogenesis for the males, and we're going to start to see the male secondary sex characteristics. So these are identifiable, like physical characteristics that help us to identify that as a male. And so penis and a scrotum are going to start to grow. Facial hair is going to start to grow. The larynx is going to elongate. That helps to lower the voice. Shoulders can start to broaden. Body, armpit, and pubic hair are going to grow. And musculature is going to increase body wide. Okay. Then as far as females go, we're going to start to see that estrogen release, right? So we're going to start to see the development of the female secondary sex characteristics. So the breasts are going to start to develop and mature, the hips are going to broaden, and we can even start to see some pubic hair starting to grow in females. And then we start what's called folliculogenesis. Okay? Now, before puberty, the hypothalamus and the pituitary are very sensitive to our negative feedback signals from testosterone and estrogen. However, during puberty, the sensitivity of the hypothalamus to the negative feedback decreases to what we see in males and females, or adult males and females, okay? And so that's going to allow an increase in the production of testosterone and estrogen, and that's going to stimulate those development of secondary sex characteristics, right? We've sort of turned off the negative. It starts to degrade that negative response, okay? So make sure that you review the process and the outcome of meiosis, describe those structures and functions of the female reproductive system, correlate the hormonal and the structural changes during the menstrual cycle, and then identify factors that contribute to female infertility. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out. Hope you guys are doing